How's everybody doing? Yeah. All right.
Oh, we're on.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. We are on. Any fans of the Halo lore and universe? That's good. This will be an awkward panel otherwise to be at. Very, very bored. How are you doing?
I'm all right. I just got in last night, dead of night. Had chicken wings for dinner at midnight.
It's incredible. By the way, Houston, your food's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. If you're local Houstonite, great stuff. Pinkerton's barbecue, absolutely incredible. It's good stuff. So my name is Jeff Easterling. I'm a writer on the franchise team. And we'll actually talk a little bit about what that even means in just a few minutes. And I am joined by the one and only, the most handsome janitor in the universe, Mr. Frank O'Connor.
Thank you. Hong Kong Fooey, technically more handsome.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. Any Beamish fans here? Beamish fans? It's good. Best cameo ever.
Yeah.
Actually, the best Beamish cameo was we did the Ice Bucket Challenge several years ago, and we filmed a video for it. And at the very, very end, there's a little Beamish stinger. Just had him out there in the back patio of the old 434 building, which is now demolished. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
It's not, no.
And that was a temporary broom from that closet, even though we have a prop, actual sci-fi space broom.
It is true.
Yeah.
It is true. So, first of all, I want to kind of go overview. What we want to do is we want to talk about kind of not just like the lore of the Halo universe, but really some of the process behind it and some of the intentionality of it. We call this Canon Fodder Live because it's like based in a series that we do on Halo Waypoint called Canon Fodder that really dives into the lore, and it takes a look at some of the like deeper and hidden corners in the universe, but also talks a little bit about the process and the intentionality behind it. We do, interviews with authors and folks who work on the game and in the narrative to again give you guys some behind the scenes look on what it's like to craft the lore for a universe that is now going on 2 decades. And the more populated the universe becomes, in some ways, the crazier it is to try to tell the stories, tie everything together, make sure that you have loose threads taken care of where they need to be. Like, is something running over another? It's not easy. We have a team at 343, kind of like almost like a central service team now, called the franchise team. Frank, how would you describe franchise team? Because it's really your baby, your master franchise.
Yeah. Hive of scum and villainy.
That's true.
Obviously.
That's on our business cards.
You said it. We're set up like, in some ways, any of the other services teams at 343 Industries to provide that service to anyone who needs it. So, I mean, a typical day might involve giving our animation team reference on older elites, locomotion, or creating new fiction from scratch to either fill in a gap, to your point, or more frequently and more likely to take something that we've already designed as fiction, a character, a scenario, and expand upon it because it's now needed for something in the game or something in the TV show or a new novel plot. And there's actually an awful lot is filled in the background that we then just extrapolate from and build upon to make more story. And one thing I wanted to ask the audience: how many of you guys want to be writers? Forget Halo, but writing screenplays, novels, comic books, whatever it is. It's a lot of it is the same challenge for writing in any medium. And the other thing that's unique, I think, about us is we do get to write in every medium. You get to write screenplays, long form, short form fiction, comic books, and they're all really different skills. And so we have a big team that
and different voices sometimes as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've always said is my favorite thing about working like on this type of a team and in this universe is like we get the benefit from Halo is that we tell stories in so many different mediums. I always love it when people are like, well, what's your average day like? And I'm like, I mean, well, what day? I mean, it literally could be, we're working on cool stuff for Halo Infinite campaign. And the next day could be, I'm writing the text for the back of an action figure package. or a little bit of lore for a Master Chief toothbrush.
Right.
And then the next day it could be like, we're working with Troy Denning or Kelly Gay or Matt Forbeck or any one of our, wonderful novelists who are crafting worlds, in a book, or working on a cutaway cross-section book or reference or guidebooks. Do you have any personal, favorite aspects to work on, or
I enjoy
sweet spot there?
I enjoy weird, short challenges of, we don't have a thing, but we need a version of that thing to function. This is a real example. We also do our geopolitical checks, and that is you send the name of a new weapon, for example, to the legal team. They check against trademarks and copyrights and logos and stuff like that. But then when the multiplayer team has a new weapon and they need a name, and this is Kenneth Peters, one of the franchise team's specialty, we need a Forerunner sounding name for a weird new variant of the incinerator, and it needs to have a dramatic sounding name, but also feed into this fictional background that we're giving this weapon. This weapon is an incinerator, but it's designed to incinerate hair, for example.
It's true.
So coming
hair
up with those little,
confirmed.
Yeah. The Weaver Reaver, I think. But seriously,
Reaver.
Those little
There's the name. That's
chunks,
the new name of the weapon.
Those are fun.
Yeah.
The least fun thing, I think, is going to depend on the person.
Yeah.
Long form is tough always. If you're writing a novel, that is hard.
And you've written, if not a novel, you've written like Saint's Testimony,
bunch of short
for example.
stories, novellas, and screenplays and things like that. But writing a whole novel is too hard.
How would you say that storytelling, specifically in the Halo universe, has changed since you arrived on the scene, which was what year?
I started on Halo 2 in 2003.
Okay.
And started, in terms of writing, it was things like the manuals.
Yeah.
And we had fun with the manual on Halo 2 because we were doing a special edition.
Manuals, by the way, used to be little books that came with games.
Yeah, it's like
told you stuff about the game. Yeah, it's like a paper website.
Paper FAQ. Yeah. But we did 2 manuals for Halo 2. One for the regular edition, one for the limited edition. The regular edition, I think, is UNSC.
Yep.
So they're referring to weapons as sort of military, human things. But there's everything, character descriptions in there as well. And if you get the limited edition, and I know people have it because I've signed a bunch today.
It's true.
It's told in the Covenant perspective. So Chief is a bad guy, the Covenant's proud and noble, and so on. So those little things are fun.
Anybody have the Conversations from the Universe edition of that, the Halo 2 collectors? All right.
Somebody does, because I saw it this morning.
Oh, yeah.
It's my mom.
I knew it. I knew that was her.
Plant.
So, but yeah. So talk about like some of the changes though that from then to now in a way.
I think a lot of things haven't changed, which is good because you want some sort of continuity. But when I first started, we were working on things like the Story Bible and background stuff. Obviously, we worked with Joe Staten and the creative directors on any given game and those guys. But Rob McLeese, Lorraine McLeese, Brian Gerard, who's here as well, they all have to work on aspects of this. And building the Story Bible, which is now digital and searchable and indexable and so on.
Actually, it's a dusty tome in the basement that we just
there is literally a dusty tome. It's like basically a giant ring binder full of stuff, but it's long since been outdated.
Yeah.
And we create so much fiction and so many tools for the fiction that eventually we had to go digital. So the Story Bible now will fit on a micro SD card, and you could accidentally inhale it, as I did once, demonstrating that you can inhale an SD card.
When people talk about ingesting the story, I don't think that's exactly what they specifically mean.
Yep.
And telling stories, I think, within specifically a game's universe is really interesting because it's a little bit different from a medium standpoint, where there are a lot of things that are just directly tied to game development that could actually have an impact on the narrative that have nothing necessarily to do with the narrative. So like if you just want to be like, I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to write a book, and it's just going to be my story, and that's the story, and it's what it is because it's what I want. But if we're writing a story for a game, like, you could have something that is with the sandbox of the game, so vehicles and weapons, or you know, campaign levels, or all of a sudden this campaign mission now got cut. How then do we change and adjust the story to get what we want in there? But you know, or like an actor is unable to do a part, and you now change that character. We've actually talked a little bit, like originally in Halo 5, the other member, the fourth member of Fireteam Osiris, was going to be Thorn from Fireteam Majestic. Thorn, Anybody play Spartan Ops? Underrated. Spartan Ops is awesome. But then it actually, just through real world scenarios, it ended up that we got somebody else to do that. And so that we ended up, you know, we had to settle for Nathan Fillion, which I think is relatively okay.
Nathan literally wanted to be a Spartan. And was only an ODST, so he literally was upgraded in the story almost as a direct personal request.
Yes.
We were building the Spartan Forza as a piece of storytelling. But yeah, Nathan Fillion is a Spartan largely because he wanted to have thick, beautiful hair.
It's true.
Didn't want a regulation ODST buzz cut. And it's Nathan Fillion, so you just make things happen for him. But
that's fair. If Nathan asks for something, usually you give it to him. He's just
Jeff
so handsome.
You made a good point about the changes that you make for game stories aren't necessarily narrative or rational in the sense that you'd understand with a story. Real example, I think it was Halo 2, might have been Halo 3, Zodiac boat. Like, there was some effort made to make a sandbox boat with an outboard motor. Looked like, you know, one of those quasi-inflatable Zodiac sort of tenders. Big enough for a few people, was going to have a turret, all sorts of things. The water tech for the waves, it wasn't necessarily a tech thing, but there was some design things. And it just things get cut all the time, hit production chop sheet, but you're, you know, 3 hours of Odysseus sailing across the ocean on a Halo ring is gone. And it has nothing to do with your original intent, and you just have to be much more adaptable. I think things have gotten a little bit more disciplined over the years, just in terms of how production as a discipline has gotten. But with bigger teams, you still run into the same issues. Technology can drive story decisions that have nothing to do with technology, and you're always at the mercy of the production schedule. So.
Well, not only that, but like also different styles and sizes of studios and organizations of studios can also be a little bit different too. Sometimes the team that is writing your narrative is also you know, a lead engineer or a programmer or a designer on that. But then sometimes you have a dedicated narrative team. That's a lot of times that's the way kind of it works. Like, for example, if you played, you know, Halo 5 or Halo Wars 2 or Infinite, as well as you have a narrative team that is dedicated to the campaign and story kind of like on the day-to-day, because again, there's so many stories being told in Halo that you can't have one little team that's doing all of it. So you have people that are, and teams that are focused on telling those stories, and then like our team will actually go across all of them and help. Again, one day we could be, you know, helping our narrative team with stuff for the game, and then the next day we're, you know, talking with authors, and then some of those things actually can cross over even with each other.
Yeah, and there's some strategy to that when we're making a game and we're introducing new characters and new scenarios. We'll try and cover those in the extended fiction, and it's always that balance between what's in the game that needs to be, everything I need to know has to be there and central to that game narrative, but people get curious about things like the Arbiter. And what is the history of the Arbiters?
Any Arbiter
Tell me
fans?
more about that. And, so we're often our fiction, especially our publishing and our literature, is often requests. It's like, we want to know more about the ODSTs. When we were making Halo Legends, there were a bunch of items we wanted to hit. We wanted to do an ODST story. We wanted to talk about sniping in the Halo universe, and so on and so on. So we have these sometimes lists of questions.
Because Halo Legends was 2009, I believe.
And
same year as ODST the game.
And so we wanted to tell more stories about the ODST, so we put the babysitter episode in that. But you brought up a point at the start of this chat, which is that when you are when you're working in a universe as big as this, you use a lot of different voices.
Yeah.
So we have different artists, different writers, different creative directors, and so on, all trying to translate or interpret that universe. And that was one of the best things that I think Bungie set up in the first place, was a universe where things are strong and recognizable enough and with enough inherent charisma that they can be translated by anyone and still recognizable. So when you're watching an anime studio's take on the Master Chief or on an ODST, that it instantly reads as that to you, regardless of how far either the tone of voice or the aesthetic design has shifted. And that's one of my favorite things about Halo, is that it is recognizable through all sorts of filters for different audiences and different media.
It's interesting too. Of course, as most of you guys know, Halo is actually a book series that spawned off video games.
Technically, yeah.
Technically.
6 weeks.
For 6 weeks, there was only a Halo book, Fall of Reach. Eric Nyland. You guys ever read Fall of Reach? Anybody Fall of Reach fans here? Good stuff. We do, we'd like to joke about that. Fall of Reach actually preceded the game by about a month and a half. So the book came first. But it's funny, when we talk about telling stories, and you mentioned something about the balance, and that balance is key and precarious and crazy, like as we go in, because it's interesting, you want to tell stories, like if you're making a book or a comic or an animation or something, you want to reward the literal investment, whether it be time and money, of folks like yourself who pour into these products. You want to reward that investment with making that story meaningful and make it feel like it is tied to the overall universe, while at the same time not alienating somebody who doesn't want to read those stories. And that can be really crazy sometimes. You want like somebody to be able to play the games and just go to Halo 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and feel like they're not missing anything. But if you did maybe read the book, or you did maybe read the comic, then you actually have like kind of an enhanced experience with that. But doing that and again, not making people feel like maybe they missed out on something is a really tough thing. I think there have been examples where we, maybe did it really well, and then examples where maybe not. Can you talk a little bit about that balance?
It sometimes gets filtered through somewhat subjective lenses, and even lore fans will say, why wasn't this in the game? And the answer to that is often, well, you guys were going to be curious about it, so this is actually, it's the other way around, we give you more. I think with Halo Infinite is maybe a really good example to talk about how we think about this generally, but also especially going forward with Infinite, is in Halo CE, in the first game, you start in the middle of a battle, in the middle of a ship being boarded. You have no context.
Who is the Covenant? Why do they hate me?
It's 26th century. Who am I? I'm a green robot. What's going on? Who's the blue lady? And so on and so on. But you get the exposition happens as you go through this adventure, and then by the time you land on the surface of the Halo ring, you have an idea what your job is, what your responsibility is, what your mission is, and you learn more about the mystery of both the Covenant and the spoiler Flood as you go through. But Halo Infinite, we've talked about certainly looking at some legacy gameplay elements and so on. But in terms of story, we want to do that again. We want to stick new players in the middle of a completely fleshed out universe with lots of questions, and the story will set about answering those questions very directly. And the good thing about our core and lore fans is they can come along on that ride because they will have very, very similar questions. Who's this? What's this guy? Are you sure it's safe to be in a Pelican? No, it is not safe to be in a Pelican. They're going to crash. That's their deal. And so on. And so as the
like, how do we make everybody be equally lost?
And making people curious and then giving them answers is one way to deal with writing a novel, for example, but definitely a screenplay or a game screenplay. So.
Just quick show of hands. How many of you guys more or less regularly read some of the books and the comics and things like that?
That's a lot.
Awesome. I think one of the
selection bias, though, because
I know
a panel about it.
No, but I want to use this. I'm going to send this to Roby and Jesse and see everyone loves books, therefore we keep doing more of them, right? That's how science works.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about the VR line? VR line, how you doing? If you're in the VR line, raise your hand if you've ever read any of the Halo books.
Nice.
Awesome. Raise your hand if you could use a Halo book right now. In the VR line, that's true. You got to go audio. Got to go audio book. You could probably at least get through Saint's Testimony while you're waiting in line.
Or a dirty limerick about a janitor.
That's true. That's true. Will we ever hear more stories about Hamish Beamish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like most of my fiction plan for the next decade is about him.
That's
how magnificent,
not really a lie,
handsome, and heroic he
is.
The
reason why we won't ever remove Chief's helmet. It's just Frank's face. It's been Beamish. The entire
Which, to
time.
be fair, is an undecorated default avatar in the first place. Like, seriously,
God bless character
often I
creation.
just press A in a game, and it's like, ah, yeah.
So it's funny. So we had obviously a lot of hits, and it is selection bias. That's true. But one of my favorite aspects is that the Halo universe itself is so vast and rich that there are a lot of different stories that you can tell. You have your big epic space opera, your ancient alien mystery, your kind of galactic politics, your boots on the ground military fiction.
Yeah.
Again, quick show of hands. How many of you guys kind of prefer the more like military fiction sci-fi books, the like Troy Denning, Eric Nyland type stuff like that? How many of you guys like crazy, like ancient alien stuff, like Greg Bear, Forerunner trilogy, stuff like that? Awesome. Do you have like a particular, because like Saint's Testimony, for example, tells the story of an artificial intelligence, a human AI named Iona, and I know that that's actually something that you just have a personal interest in, like that kind of branch of science and artificial intelligence. So like you kind of pour into that type of story. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's tricky because science is always, we're sometimes playing catch up with science, and sometimes it's the other way around. The example I always give is when you watch movies, the number one thing that will date a movie sci-fi is the monitors, the displays, right?
That's true. And the cars.
If Alien, the Ridley Scott movie, had flat panel OLEDs, it would look like it was made yesterday. There's nothing about that movie that would have dated. The costumes haven't, spaceship designs haven't. It's those monitors. So we're sometimes chasing those things.
Yeah.
And we had a couple of years ago, we had a plan for slip space communication that wouldn't violate causality, if you care about that, but would be more or less instant across light years of distance. And the fake sci-fi based loosely on real scientific concept that we used for entangled quantum particles, they disproved that. So amazingly, our theory didn't turn out to be the real science.
Great.
But sometimes you just make assumptions
Canon
about what we know now versus what we find out. And since Halo started 18 years ago, we have discovered a bunch of things. Most of the galaxy is made of dark matter.
Yeah.
There are almost twice as many stars in the galaxy as we thought. And there are things that actually have an impact on how we think about it. Not to the point where we need to retcon them necessarily, because we always go light for this exact reason. But it does come back to how are you designing the monitors for the TV show? Yeah. And we're like, we just don't want them to
that's one of the reasons why, like, for example, we're very, very selective even on tying things to real world stuff.
Right.
Like, you have Earth, obviously, and Earth gives you that grounded sense of familiarity, because, I'm fighting for Earth. That, like, kind of means something, even just as a baseline. But if you start to tie everything to, like, a real star system, a real this, a real that, it also kind of, like, shackles you from a narrative standpoint where you want to tell certain stories. And that kind of leads me into the idea of, canon. Like, canon is a really interesting thing when you think about it. And I know somebody's going to be recording this, and they'll put it online. Yeah. And we'll get tweets from the ELD and CIA and Toa Freak, all you guys out there. Yeah. I love you all. And then, because there's questions that kind of come up about like canon and the idea that no, when you establish something, consistency is key above all else. No matter what But there are things that kind of come in and
Yeah.
especially when you get to a story like Halo, which has taken now 2 literal decades of storytelling, has changed hands, you have different creatives involved, and even the way you tell your stories have changed. Could you talk a little bit about like how, what is the approach to the idea of canon? How it's tough to decide like what is sacred and what is not sacred, but like how do you make the distinction?
The easier philosophical argument to get to is, was it necessary to change that? So nobody likes retconning, and everybody hates retconning if there isn't a good reason for it. The one that used to blow my mind, this is going to sound dumb, but when I was a kid, the Incredible Hulk TV show with Bill Bixby, they changed his name to David Banner because they thought Bruce Banner sounded goofy. And that's an example of a change where you're like, where's the value?
I like that he still turned into a giant hulking green guy, though.
Yeah, but
we draw the line at Bruce.
Yeah, but sometimes there's a good reason, right? And nowadays that same issue might be tied up with Universal's rights versus Marvel Cinematic Universe's rights and so on. If there's a reason for it and there's a good reason and it improves the output, then sure, but at least be respectful of what was there. Yeah. Or be open. If we look at
they're communicating the intentionality
in Legends. Yes, we got the original Dragon Ball Z director and artist together for the first time in 20 years because they had a falling out, and they wanted to put a dinosaur in a Halo short. So we're like, okay, all right, well, we want to see that too. Can we have a giant bro fist punch Dragon Ball style? Yes. And so that one's out of canon, but you just get out ahead of it and you say where this sits relative to the canon and what its purpose is. And I think people always appreciate being told the truth. They might not like it.
Yes.
They may wish that dinosaurs were canon. They are with the blind wolves now. So
we'll find some sort of way to get Pluton in there.
People also just want you to be honest. And we got there was a lot of noise when Reach came out. And adjusted things like where the Pillar of Autumn was in orbit and so on. And there were practical reasons for a lot of that, but one or two of them were just, they're either whiffs or we didn't think people would care that much. But this stuff's important to people because they've invested in it for so long, and I think the number one thing that they want is openness. So if we do have to make a change, and touch wood, we're not going to have to change a lot, if anything, for Infinite. But if we do, we'll just be open about what the reason was, and
What about the role that, like, we just came off the player voice panel, and the role that the community plays in something like multiplayer maps or sandbox balancing feels a little more clear cut. Like, oh, we've got science, we've got data, and we can say like, oh, this weapon is definitely OP, or people keep quitting out of these maps. That makes sense. Narrative is a very, very different beast, though, and I know a lot of times that we'll see even feedback on the forums that like, oh, but I want this. I wanted the story to go this way, and then how does feedback even get taken into that? Like, how do we think about like incorporating, or not even incorporating, but just respecting the sentiment and things like that? It's weird with narrative.
It has one thing in common with the gameplay example you used, which is that you often were testing things that aren't done. It's a multiplayer balance that isn't working at 60 frames a second. You're not testing it with 1 million players online at any given moment, and you're not testing through all scenarios. So sometimes you put trust in the designer, and the designer says, yes, it's not going to work in this test, but trust me, it will work. And Max Hoberman's going to talk about that later this afternoon, as it relates to Xbox
come back
Live.
For that.
But so sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and trust that it's going to get to where we want. But with story, you're often creating things from whole cloth, and there's no way to scientifically test it. And nobody wants a story that was focus tested in a lab anyway, because then you just get either the lowest common denominator or the most diluted vision, and that's tough. But also, it's a pretty subjective thing. And people are going to absorb it differently, and have different resonance. Cortana is a great example of meaning, and we deal with this in the canon all the time. Is I could do a straw poll in this audience and get 4 or 5 different versions of what Cortana's relationship with Chief is.
It's true.
She's like my sister. She's I've got a romantic attachment to her. She reminds me of my cousin, or
My mom.
she's my AI personal assistant.
Yeah, she's Alexa.
Yeah, and Cortana.
On brand.
Yeah, you can do that. But that's good. We lean into that. People having different expectations and appreciations of nuance. That's the point. Like, you're not supposed to feel exactly one way about anything. We want you to fill it in with your imagination and your passion or your knowledge. Because things that are not detailed in game will mean something different to this audience than they will to a new audience. The Pillar of Autumn's a spaceship, and you'll be on that spaceship saying, it's not for long. And so the context always changes between viewers and readers and listeners. So,
when we talked, you mentioned earlier, we talked about like the Dusty Tome idea.
Yes.
And I know there's a lot of times where sometimes, and it's not just with Halo, it's with a lot of different franchises, there's a romanticism in some ways as far as like how far out a story is planned. Yeah. And there's a balance to all of that, because there are elements that are very long game, but also what is long game might not be, these pillars that we want to get to, but there are things in the middle that can change, or maybe there's real world, again, reasons why you move. Can you talk a little bit about like how that goes, the balance between stuff that we plan out far out, which we have plenty of, and stuff that we pivot to along the way?
Yeah, we plan out way longer than you would think, but we can't hammer that out and harden it and make that the plan of record forever, because things change. There's a new console coming out next year, which changes some of the things we're able to do with scale and so on, and all of that stuff changes.
We got the woo back there. That was great.
It affects the fiction, but we also have long pole foundational pillars that we planned. One thing that we planned, and you'll know what I'm talking about, relates to what the name of the studio is, why we hired Greg Bear, what we fed as suggestions for Greg into how a certain character is, and even a redemption arc for that character that spans literally millennia in the fiction.
And multiple mediums.
Yeah, and multiple mediums. And right now, part of his original fate that we decided a long time ago, 15 years ago, is on a book cover.
Yep.
As a real thing. So some of this plays out, and we stick to our guns because circumstance doesn't change it.
Yeah.
But you can't plan infinitely far out, if you'll pardon the pun.
Oh.
It's terrible. Terrible.
Another thing that I was actually going to mention a few minutes ago is the way that lore kind of like seeps into things, but also kind of the order in which it comes in too. For example, we can have like an art style change for like Halo 5 is a great example, 4 and 5 really. I remember many long nights with the aforementioned Kenneth Peters, where he and I would sit at Wild Rover in downtown Kirkland near Seattle, and we would write all of the lore strings for the armor, and we would come up with some of the lore stuff to help with some of the changes in design. And those changes a lot of times will come out because it's an artistic vision thing. Yeah. For whatever reason, they're changing and going in a certain way. So you don't need, like, lore isn't just dictating that, or you don't necessarily need to explain it. Because I know some people are like, why would you attach like lore to it and then make this arbitrary change? It's like, oh no, don't worry, the change is going to happen. Like, but sometimes it's actually fun to attach some lore to it so that it makes the overall universe feel really believable. So that if I say, like right now, if I were talking about modern world and I said a jet or a fighter jet,
right?
Yeah, most people might have like a kind of a generic jet, but then there'll be other people like, well, is it an F-15? Is it an F-15D? Is it an F-16? 18? Tomcat? Hornet? Like, what payload are we talking about here? It's like, when you start to say like, oh, he was actually flying an F-14, now it puts a new thing in your head. It's no secret, my favorite vehicle in the universe is the Banshee. And like, I love like going in, and when you, rather than just saying, oh, a Banshee is a Banshee, like however it looks is just however it looks, I'm like, no, I don't like that. Yeah. I like that you have like a, a type this or an A or a B, because then it kind of makes it feel lived in. Because now in my head I'm imagining, you know, fleets of carriers that have like different models of them, or maybe special models that are commissioned for a group of elite pilots that go do it. And again, it just all adds to that kind of nature of world building. But what's funny is a lot of it originates from just an element of game design, but we kind of try to use the lore and the richness of the universe to make it feel all a part of the, you know, one cohesive unit.
Another aspect of the sort of artifice of making a game versus just writing a book, I guess, is we're working on a big project right now, and one of the production designers on this big project said, well, should this elite, if he's going to use active camo, should he smash a glass pyramid in the ground? Like, how do you? But these are real questions, and we have to scratch our heads and say, well, that's only like that because the game was based on pickups back then, but it would be attack and their armband, and
he has to run to the center of the map and grab the glass.
And there's a lot of things that games change in story applications. That we don't necessarily think about between, we'll move on to the next generation of game, but these things all have meaning to somebody. And you know, even the Warthog design over here is like, no, we want it to look like this Warthog for this reason. Rather
the amount of emails, by the way, that went into the way that Warthog looks. Trust me, it's crazy. Well, what I want to do, we've got about 20 minutes left, and I want to open it up to questions from you guys. I know that there are burning questions. We will deftly dodge things that we can't answer, but we will we'll certainly indulge whatever we can. Where is Beef?
Beef.
I need Beef. Everyone give Beef a round of applause.
Is he sponsored by Arby's as well?
He should be, yes. Yeah, that's
like
it. He is
walking
Beef
NASCAR
is, yes,
Beef.
I called him the pillar of inquiry yesterday. Folks like that. So if you have a question for us, or maybe for Beef, please line up at Beef. And we will get to.
He's the pious inquisitor.
Say what?
Pious inquisitor.
Yes, he is the pious inquisitor, or a frious inquisitor. We can, you know. How are you doing? Happy birthday, Trevor.
Thank you.
I'm not going to sing to you again.
Trevor brought people cake. It's all gone, but he brought fans cake.
Trevor literally brought a cake that feeds like 80 people and put it in the VIP lounge. Give it up for Trevor's birthday one more time.
Thank you, guys.
Trevor's
appreciate
21.
It.
Yeah, Trevor's 21 today.
I got you a case of Zima in the back that I've been saving for 21 years.
You're going to need the whole case. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, so DC has their Elseworld stories.
Yes.
I was wondering if you guys had ever thought about doing something like Elseworlds, where you could make these crazy what-if stories in the Halo universe.
Yes. Thought about a lot of
we
things,
have.
Yes.
There are applications of it. To Jeff's earlier point, we have a lot of stuff that we just haven't used, but it's ready to go. I can't get into this one in any detail, but
we've thought about
Odd One Out would fit.
I was actually going to mention
kind of
Odd One Out,
right?
is a good example of that.
So if there was a vehicle and it was a dinosaur, it keeps coming back to dinosaurs for some reason, that would fit in that category. I think you have to put it in the right place. That might work in multiplayer or firefight or something like that. I don't think you'd want to put that directly in a lore, but you might also want to make it optional after first play or after people have gotten the sort of artistic intent of the game. Then I think you can just loosen things up.
Kind of the element of like, Samurai Batman or you know, Astronaut Ninja Turtles or stuff like that. Those things are always like, I think that's one of the cool things about the Halo universe is that like it's super rich and there's lots of cool things that you can do with it. You know.
Want to see Samurai Master Chief now.
Wow, what a
thanks. Yeah.
Uncanny question.
Hi, my name's Blaine. So first of all, I just want to say thanks for what y'all do. Y'all have created something.
Thank you for playing and reading.
And
otherwise,
and to everyone for coming. Seriously,
yes, absolutely.
Like even just coming from Houston, it's a long way to get here, and it's hot, and we appreciate you guys coming all the way out.
Absolutely.
Folks from Alaska and abroad.
I know.
Yep.
Legit.
Yeah.
Mexico,
Yeah,
Alaska.
Trevor doesn't count. He got a free ticket.
No, Trevor doesn't count anymore.
Yeah.
Trevor is at every event, so
Yeah.
it's like unless you go to Mars, like,
Yeah.
it's not impressing me anymore.
Yeah.
So so the Halo universe is huge, and I know you mentioned the Dusty Tome, but then you also mentioned that it was replaced by a digital thing.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask was, is the digital thing like some custom software? Is it
it's-
and then also like how
Yeah.
are these things, like how is this program used to like cross-check facts for new
Yeah.
things, and who has access and
Yeah.
you know,
Great
just in
question.
general?
So the short answer to the tech is it's a combination of some custom software and a big kind of off-the-shelf solution for massive indexing,
Like
and
digital
archiving
asset
projects.
management, essentially.
Yeah. It effectively acts like basically a big website.
Like a wiki.
And
kind of.
we have there are different striations of it. So there is a version for the artists to go look at, where we have culled things that we think are going to be distracting or irrelevant.
Yeah.
And they'll get a nice clean version of each version of the Master Chief, and some information like Chief in CE looks like this because there was 400 polys versus looks like this in Infinite because of the new sort of specular model for, and so on and so on and so on. But for fiction, most of it is there. We hide some things because they're not firm yet, and we haven't figured out if this is going to be the permanent situation. But you just search any term, Master Chief's face, and it will come up with explanations, examples.
There's certain
and links to assets in a lot of
There's
cases.
certain things, like for example, like if you look up our internal article on, the Arbiter, and it'll give and we have kind of like the higher you are in it is the most relevant information for partners that we might be working with. The more you scroll, the deeper you are down the rabbit hole. And again, a lot of it is depending on like who is our audience. So like we may be working with teams that are working on a game or working on some sort of ancillary fiction that like, hey, here's an example of here is every game that Arbiter has appeared in. Here is here is the look that it has had in every single one. Here are differences maybe in gameplay. You see a lot of that with like weapons from game to games or whatever. And we also have an article that is just Arbiters. Like we have the names of all Arbiters that you guys know about and don't know about. Like we know their names, and those names are ready to be seeded into fiction, hopefully eventually. But like you said, there are certain things that we actually will write fiction beyond what is given to kind of give like a good foundation for multiple parties to work from. But until it becomes public, it's a malleable thing in some sort of ways. And we get this question, I answered a question earlier from somebody who asked, like it's one of the reasons why we don't necessarily just answer every little question on like Twitter or a Canon Fodder or something like that. Because
it's in progress.
Yeah, it's either in progress or you want to be really deliberate about what you kind of nail down, and is it for a good reason? Like if someone tweets and they're like, well, what is the crew compartment of X class of a ship? We could literally just either pull something or make it up right there on the spot. And as soon as we do, now it's a thing. And it was really only a thing because you just asked the question. I could say like, 300. But maybe a year later, we have a really, really compelling narrative reason why that ship really needs to have 1,000 people. And now if we say 1,000, people are mad. Because we said 300, we established it. Well, why did we establish it? Because he asked the question. I just wanted to be nice.
It's also not all necessarily stories. So the Arbiter section might have disambiguations about RB and the Chief. What is RB in RB and the Chief? And you explain what it is a web series, blah, blah, blah.
Even like history of the character.
Delicious, succulent roast beef sandwich with this amazing velvety rich cheddar sauce. That's Arby's.
Now I'm hungry.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, I sold that
Thanks
to
a
myself.
lot.
I'm hungry.
How do you guys? Oh shoot!
There you go.
You're good.
That was,
It's a theater training.
My name is Jake. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for releasing stuff when I deploy, so I have something to do in all my downtime.
Thank you for what you do.
We saw Jake this morning as well.
But my question is, going from Halo 3 to Halo 4, I love Halo 4. I love the story. I love the Chief's journey, Cortana's journey through it. What has been some of the difficulties going from that Halo 3 aesthetic to your own aesthetic while still keeping true to both sides, trying to keep the older fan base happy, like myself.
Yeah.
We did check out the Warthog and made sure, like, okay. Is that Halo 2 or Halo 3? I don't want to say Halo 4, but like, what are some of the challenges you guys face that way?
The number one challenge is always personnel. Between any game, between Halo 1 and Halo 2, the Bungie team changed almost unrecognizably. Like new artists, new creators, same Halo 3, now it's on Xbox 360. There's higher poly budget. You're not able to do things that you intended to do in the previous games but couldn't because you didn't have the fidelity. Then you get to Halo 4, big engine overhaul, completely new art team, totally different staff, different built-in aesthetic. In some ways they don't change any more than they do every single time. ODST and Reach accepted in some ways because of the timing on that. But I think Infinite is the first, and I think our guy budgeting GPU overhead's going to kill me for this. It's going to be the first game where, because our base platform's Xbox One, and our peak platform is, Scarlet or unknowable PC, we no longer are constrained by any fidelity reasons for design. So the intention, and you've seen this in Halo Infinite, is to capture what we thought was best as a sort of gestalt for what were the best aspects of the Chief over the years. What are the ones that fans all loved? What are the ones that we all personally loved?
Including 4 and 5.
And then we're no longer limited by the number of polygons or what kind of surface properties metal can have or the lighting engine. We're at that stage of fidelity where everything is now intention, but there will always be artistic interpretation under that, but also trends. If we released, and a lot of you will deny this, but I think you look within yourself, you'll know it's true. If we released a Chief that looked exactly like the Halo CE Chief today, but with more fidelity, it would look weird because trends have changed and expectations have changed. So that's, I think, one of the most exciting things about Infinite is finally getting the chance to go and look at how things settled over the years aesthetically and make the exact version that maybe we always wanted to make and couldn't, or always wanted to go back to, and that's been a fun process.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much.
How's it going, guys? My name's Connor. Actually, played Halo 2 back in 2005. It was one of my first video games, and it caught me from day one. I love the game so much. I love the story. Loved everything about it. I said, who can I thank for such a cool game?
Max Hoberman is here.
Yes.
He was one of the
Halo
original.
2 is my favorite, by the way.
Yeah.
Max is we're honored to have him, but he was one of the sort of founding Bungie folks on Halo. Worked on Halo multiplayer and Halo CE, but arguably, and he'll talk more about this afternoon, like soon after this, in fact, came up with matchmaking, the way our ranking system works, the way that you're connected with your friends.
Pillars that actually Xbox Live still use, and today.
You'll be amazed how many things that you take for granted on consoles generally, including Xbox Live OS features, that were built specifically, and this is a hyper simplification of it, to recreate the Halo LAN experience on Xbox Live as efficiently and smoothly and happily as possible. So at the time, a lot of people felt it was taking some choices away, the sort of server list, but Max is one of the OG creators and really influential in all sorts of things, not just multiplayer.
It's a good theatrical trailer for that panel, actually.
So I would thank everyone, but Max is a great person to fling that at.
But as far as storytelling developing goes and universe development, I mean, what was sort of like the moment you realized like Halo was becoming something big? Because you were an integral part of writing that story, so what was it like?
I started on Halo 2, and so I was working on things like background story and character dialogue and things like that. But the story was sort of baked when I got there. It got really thrown out with the bathwater when they had to make a bunch of really tough production decisions. But it starts with a little bit of influence from Jason Jones. One story I hear is he had this line for Halo 2 that he wanted to be the flavor of the story of Halo 2, and it was, I am the monument to all your sins, which he said to Joe Staten, and said, just run with that. That's your story. And so Joe Staten then goes and fleshes all this out.
There you go.
But back in the day, there are very small teams, and everyone is feeding into that story. It's still true to a certain extent nowadays, but with much bigger teams, everything is much more centralized and discipline specific.
Yeah. Well, thanks for keeping it all together for
Yeah.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey guys, a little too close. I'm Keaton. I'm also from Alaska. And favorite Halo is Halo 2. Favorite book was Reach. But my main question was regarding like the Forerunners and Precursors. I was wondering if you guys had any plans for like a more in depth on their like the war between the two of them, because like the Precursors were always a lot more powerful, but then the Forerunners like had an advantage, and then all that.
We have that's a good example of things where we have loads of backstory that doesn't get committed. Like we won't even share that with.
Yeah. It's also important to remember too that like, Halo 4, for example, really started to dive in the Halo 4 era, and I mean Halo 4 and like the Greg Bear trilogy and stuff like that. It's really started to dive into the Forerunners, which until then had always been really just kind of mysterious, monolithic type stuff. And the interesting thing is, like, it's a weird balance where you want to answer and solve mystery, but that really only works if you open up other mysteries. Yeah. And so I think it's important to have elements like all of a sudden now, like, well, wait a second, but what about these guys? What about the Precursors, and what does that mean? And there are elements that, in all honesty, might never be touched. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but it's important to always have that out on the periphery. Yeah. So it's, again, there are elements that you could tell stories in there or not. The key is, like, where's the balance on that mystery? And not necessarily story. There was a concept, and it might still come to fruition, a concept of a antediluvian precursor-based multiplayer map with that huge, spoiler, bug in its prison. True. And there are other places we can put that story flavor in the universe that don't really require a lot of exposition, but add value to... Multiplayer maps, in all honesty, are actually one of my favorite spaces in the universe. Maps like Epitaph and High Noon and Sandbox. Epitaya. Yes. And my cousin, Josiah and Epitaya. Scarab Assembly Factory, where we're showing how worms' biology works and how you put a scarab together. Instead of where you're not actually directly like writing a novel on it, but you can wander around this place and be like, holy crap, what goes on here? And like, there's some really neat environmental storytelling that goes on there. Including the Dune Easter egg in the rig. Yes, that's true.
Hi guys, my name is Niati. So your story has taken up so many of my free weekends, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I don't know if we should apologize.
Stay in school. I have to say that contractually.
So I was wondering if we would be able to get to see Arbiter and Master Chief work together in Infinite, and if you can't answer that, because spoilers, I was wondering what gave you the idea for Arbiter, Arbiter's story arc, his character arc, how you decided to let the player play as Arbiter. Stuff like that.
I'm answering this, but I'm going to paraphrase Joe Staten, so apologies. The Arbiter was originally called the Dervish. And the name changed as some of his role changed as well. And the intent was to show the gray area and complexity of opponents. Like, we knew that not every Covenant is a bad guy. But what does that mean? And they had, the Covenant history had already been sort of built by then. It's a series of client species that are aligned around this one philosophical and sort of religious thing. But what happens if there's disagreement? What happens if there is, and we discover, again, spoilers, the prophets are deliberately trying to keep humans out of the picture because they found out that the Forerunners loved humans and wanted to be their boyfriend. Just jealous. They're jealous. But we wanted to explore that story, and we also wanted to create a kind of one-to-one symmetrical character for the Chief, that is in some ways a Covenant reflection, but without being mechanically identical to the Chief. So the Chief is kidnapped at 6 and conscripted into this military program. The Arbiter's lived his whole life in honor and respect, and then has it upended. So he's almost the opposite of the Chief's story in that regard, and that was the core behind that. So,
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'll just say, Canon Fodder got me through, like I was reading it before I could drive, so yeah, no, I was doing that instead of going to parties and you know.
Yes, good. I kept you away from parties and bad things. It's all worth it now. Thank you.
Better than parenting. No, if I could just make a comparison, and so I can put context to my question. In 2014, when the trailer for The Force Awakens dropped, everybody was like, the hype was unreal. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, Star Wars is back!" And when this movie came out, and this is not an objective thing I'm trying to say, the opinions were split because they said, "Oh, it's leaning a little too hard on the first entry." That was a large opinion. Yeah. Now the trailers for Infinite have been, in my opinion, incredible. Like the hype has been all there. I will ask, because you've been clear about going to the first game, especially for inspiration.
Yeah.
Can we be sure this will stand on its own as its own story?
As a story, yeah. The script for that game is, there will be changes, obviously, but the game is, the story is complete. It will stand alone as a piece of fiction. If you've never played a Halo game before, again, we're leaning back on the atmosphere of Halo C in that regard, but just as a piece of standalone storytelling, it will be completely self-contained with the amount of context you need. That said, players like yourself and folks in this audience are going to see elements in there that they will be surprised that those things are in there.
It doesn't forget the rest of the universe, and that includes, you know, up to Halo 5.
Yeah.
So
everything that's happened chronologically is respected and happened, and you'll see elements of that, but we won't require that a new player have to go back and Google that or wiki it. And so
well, and you know, and again, like when you think about the external elements too, like, oh, we've also talked to, you know, Infinite's launching on a new platform and helping launch a new Xbox for the first time since CE. It's also coming on PC, you know, so it's like, it is a seminal moment for Halo that you're going to have probably a lot of people who have never played a Halo game before. Right. So how do you simultaneously, you know, reward the folks who have been here that whole time, and also, like you said, make a story that kind of stands on its own while respecting those threads and ties. Yeah. So we're hoping it hits all that.
It's also a story that raises a lot of questions deliberately as a part of its method. And if you've seen the trailers, and you will have questions about specific scenes. What does that mean? Who is this? Yeah. Where is this going? Some of the story methodology for Infinite will be, we're making you ask those questions either as a returning player or new player, and part of the story methodology is now you go get the answer, and now you get to explore what that question was and get a satisfactory answer. Right. Will it? I mean, subjectively, the quality is going to be up to you, but just in terms of a piece of practical storytelling,
hope everybody loves it.
Very much self-contained in the same way that CE was.
Yeah. So I have 4 screens telling me that was the last question.
What?
I know. I would legit just sit here all day and answer. We'll be here all through the weekend, through the evening. I'll be on this stage for at least another couple more hours. So maybe in between shows, just throw questions at me because I can't leave. That's fine. I'm stuck. Just me and my tea and my water. But thank you guys so much for what you do. Like, it's your responses and passion for it really do honestly drive the efforts and the passion that we pour into it to craft these stories. We're a part of it because we love it, and thank you so much for, you know, again, for pouring yourselves into that as well. Everybody give it up for Frank O'Connor, please.
And for Jeff Easterling. But most of all the people who drove and flew, and in one case walked here.
Yes, true. And Beef, give it up for Beef.
Beef, where's the beef?
And for the VR line, give it up for the VR line.
Thank you. And if you're curious about how Halo 2 completely reinvented how you play multiplayer, in the whole world
Yes.
for decades. Max Hoburn is going to be up here at 3:45, I think.
I believe so. Yep, I believe so. It's coming
And that
up
baby's
soon.
clapping.
I
It's
know.
adorable baby.
Yes.
Yay.
Youngest Canon Fodder reader. That's awesome. Thank you, guys.